Today, we are talking about the upcoming November elections in Virginia with Dr. Rebecca Bromley-Trujillo with the Wason Center at Christopher Newport University. This election, all 140 seats in the General Assembly will be on the ballot, 100 seats in the House, 40 in the Senate. It will be the first time since 2021 that the House has been on the ballot and the first time since 2019 for the Senate. And then going into this election, Republicans hold the House while Democrats hold the Senate. Rebecca, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So, the first question I wanted to ask is overall, what do Virginians need to know about this upcoming election?
Yeah, so there's several things. I mean, you've already noted that all of the races are up in the balance here. So, I mean, Democrats hold a very narrow edge in the state Senate, Republicans hold a very narrow edge in the state House. And so, really, very small shifts in the outcomes of these races can determine control of the entire General Assembly. And so, I'd say, in terms of the future of the state, this is one of the most critical elections that I have seen in recent memory. And certainly, there's also considerations over Governor Youngkin and his potential to run in the Republican presidential primary and some other considerations that might be on people's minds.
Going off of that, what issues do you see each side campaigning on, like really emphasizing on the campaign trail?
Yeah, so we really are seeing some common themes. On the Democratic side, it's primarily abortion, although not just that, but abortion is a key issue, of course, in part because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but also because we've seen in elections across the country that this issue has been particularly important to a lot of Democratic voters and independents. And so it has provided a bit of a roadmap. Some other states have had special elections recently where Democrats outperformed what was expected. And in part, it was because of their featuring of abortion. So for Democrats, abortion, but I would say some other localized issues related to like data centers or pocketbook issues related to taxes and the economy. On the Republican side, we're seeing a pretty heavy presence of issues around public safety and crime, and also parental role in children's education is really kind of all over the state in many races. And I'd say for Republicans, the reason those issues are dominant is in part because Governor Youngkin's success provided a roadmap for Republicans to pursue the parental role in education. That was effective for him, and so we're seeing that in a lot of areas as well. And then the crime issue, this tends to be a kind of a Republican strong point. On average, people think of the Republican Party and public safety or law and order. So this is kind of a typical issue that we see come up, and it's certainly here again.
If Republicans did win an outright majority in both chambers of the General Assembly, what kind of legislation do you think that we could expect to see move forward that has not been able to move forward with the split chamber?
In terms of what I would expect if Republicans took control of both chambers of the state legislature, I would expect abortion to be an issue that comes up, and we would likely see an approach towards that 15-week ban on abortions with some exceptions that Governor Youngkin has highlighted. I would also expect a conservative push on gun-related issues. So back when Democrats took control in 2019, they pushed through several new gun laws, including red flag laws. Those are probably a target for repeal under a Republican administration with control of the General Assembly. And then I'd also say the environment is an area that we're not seeing a lot of discussion about, but absolutely, we would see some changes. I mean, Governor Youngkin has pursued leaving the carbon cap and trade program that Virginia is in called RGGI or RGGI. And he is trying to pursue that through the executive branch, but many are saying that that's not a legal option and it would have to go through the General Assembly. So I would expect Republicans to take that up, as well as things like the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which mandates renewables by a certain date. So environment certainly I think would come up as well. I didn't mention education. A lot of Republicans are campaigning on parents and having increased involvement in education. I'd say that it's a little unclear how that would translate into legislation, specific legislation at this point. But certainly I would expect possible education policy to come up in the General Assembly under a Republican administration.
On the flip side, if Democrats ended up retaking the Virginia House and kept the Senate, what can we expect out of the last 2 years of Governor Youngkin's term?
I really think it would look similar to what we've seen recently. So though the Republicans have control of the House, a lot of their policy priorities get stopped in the Democratic-controlled Senate. So I think this would just make that slightly easier, certainly. And so Democrats would have both the House and the Senate. Then they could really act as a check on large conservative moves by Youngkin. So I just think we would continue to see a lot of the same disagreements between Governor Youngkin and a Democratic-led state legislature. And, we might see some ability to compromise on things like maybe marijuana retail sale or education funding, because there is some agreement between Republicans and Democrats on some of those issues. But mostly it would be like a prevention of a kind of more rightward push by Youngkin.
Going into this election, what would you say are the strengths and weaknesses of both Virginia Democrats and Virginia Republicans?
Yeah, so just kind of starting with Republicans, I would say they have, in ways, an advantage when it comes to education issues. And so I think kind of going in and playing that strength is probably effective for Republicans. And also on crime and sort of public safety, broadly speaking, voters tend to think of Republicans as successful in those areas. So they're certainly, we're seeing them play to their strong suits in the campaigns. And for Democrats, abortion certainly, they essentially have the upper hand here because voters have expressed that they would prefer to keep our policies where they are now rather than change them. And so in that regard, they have an upper hand. And also the issue is very salient because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And so it might be a motivator for voters, for Democrats. So I think, that's a logical area for them to pursue. So I think that's where we're at right now.
Which House and Senate races do you think would determine the outcome of this election?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the Senate side, I actually happen to live in what I believe to be the most competitive state Senate district, which is District 24. This is incumbent Monty Mason versus former Sheriff Danny Diggs. And this is a redrawn district. And so while Mason is the incumbent, he's only the incumbent of maybe 70% of the district. So there's still new voters he's speaking to. Diggs, while not an incumbent in the legislature, was sheriff. And so he was sheriff of Poquoson, York County. So voters are familiar with him, at least in parts of the district. And it's just a very swingy district, regardless of the candidate. So very purple, moderate district, and both candidates are running moderate races. We see this in their campaign advertising and in their public statements and news appearances. So, both of them are saying, I'm a moderate voice. Incumbent Mason is saying, like, while I was in the General Assembly, I did support some tax cuts, which is traditionally a Republican position. Diggs is focusing on his background in public safety and his kind of moderate stance on public safety as well. So this is really tight. I expect if it's like a seat determines the outcome, I think in the state Senate, it really could be that. On the House side, arguably the most competitive race is, I would say, House District 97, I believe is what it is, Fagans versus Greenhall and Virginia Beach. So this is a very purple district as well. It's also, I believe, the most expensive House race so far in terms of fundraising. So it's clearly competitive. Virginia Beach is just known for being a swingy area where sometimes they vote for the Democrats, sometimes they vote for the Republican. And so really like Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads, these races are highlighting the fact that these areas do go back and forth, and the fact that, Hampton Roads went for Biden, but they went for Youngkin as well. So it really just depends on who is the most motivated to come out and vote, and how that the small group of independents that kind of are undecided move. So I think that's arguably those races are the most competitive, but there's certainly many others in other parts of the state.
On Governor Youngkin, he seems very invested in this race. He's pushing early voting. His Spirit of Virginia PAC has raised a lot of money. Why would you say this election is important for Governor Youngkin's political future, and why does he seem so invested in it?
Yeah, so there's kind of two lines of argument. There's certainly like the internal Virginia argument that he has been unable to really pursue a Republican conservative agenda, given divided control in the General Assembly. And so this would allow him to make more conservative shifts in policy. And then there's the ambition angle, which is that he very likely wants to pursue politics in other ways, potentially running for president in the Republican primary as a very late arrival to that. And he has said that he won't make a decision until after the election in Virginia. So I'd say the prospect there is, let's say the Republican Party does extremely well in these elections and takes solid control of both chambers in the General Assembly, then he could tout that as, look, I was able to turn a blue state red. It would be an avenue into ambitious politics, such as running for president. And so there's a lot on the line for him, whatever direction he takes, whether it's staying around in Virginia or it's pursuing a more advanced office.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the Virginia Senate, since it's been 4 years since those seats have been on the ballot, how would you say state politics in Virginia have changed since then?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I mean, there's a lot going on there. So it's like there's this backdrop in Virginia of the state trending blue over time. It's becoming more racially diverse. The suburbs were becoming more democratic. Then Youngkin comes in and is successful. And so it's sort of a pause on this. Oh, wait, maybe this isn't just a blue trend and we're moving blue. And so when we think about the Senate, just a few years ago, Democrats had control. They had a trifecta, in fact. And so they were able to pass a lot of pretty liberal policies around guns and the environment and other things. And so now feels like a different landscape. Obviously, there's a Republican governor, there's a Republican House, maybe kind of putting the brakes on some of the more liberal or progressive policies. And so, a lot of the governing in the Senate, I think, is reflecting kind of pushback right now, of course, on a Republican agenda, but it could certainly, if the chamber flips, it would be a push towards a Republican agenda.